Hey there, I'm Mr. Terry and I'm a high school history teacher. I hope you're having a great day and welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video. All right, today's video comes from the popular channel Vox, and I thought this would be very informative. It's called Why US Elections Only Give You Two Choices. And it's interesting because the United States boasts this idea of democracy across the world, but unlike most democratic states, there are only two legitimate political parties, and it has almost always been that way. So the question is why? So I'm interested in what they have to say here, and I hope to get opportunities to add some historical context. So this original video will be linked down below, and let's get started. Americans, my fellow Americans, how important do you think it would be? How much do you think it should be a priority for our country to really try to get legitimate third or fourth parties? Do you think it would be beneficial to the political outcomes of the United States or not? Let's get started.
The person who gets the most votes wins.
Right.
Let's talk about this. In the
Now,
US,
one thing to think about is when you only have two options, the person that wins usually has over half of the vote. And a lot of democratic countries where you may have 6 to 12 legitimate candidate or parties every time, you know, somebody who wins could get like 30%. So some people wonder if that's a good representation of the country. Where the United States, you have these two political parties and they represent, to be honest, are kind of forced to represent a pretty wide variety of political opinions, although you may not see a lot of drastic changes within the parties.
we basically have two choices in elections. And listen, it's not going amazing.
Government shutdown.
Split Congress. Great divide.
Cannot agree.
Too polarized. Big majorities don't want either one of them running.
Big majorities of us actually don't want the two-party system at all. We want more options.
So my question would be is people want a third party, but where would that be? In the middle of the two parties or to maybe the right or left of the two mainstream parties? As far as the majority of people go, hard to say, because if you're seen as far left or far right of the current parties, in the United States, you're actually looked at really as an extremist. Where I know internationally, people think the United States is crazy, where our two parties are actually very, very similar to each other, Republicans and Democrats.
But a lot of the time, we actually do have more options.
Well, they're on the ballot.
It's just that when it comes time
You're always
to
going to
vote
have
for them,
all those guys.
we mostly don't.
Yeah.
We kind of can't. In our system, voting for a third party helps the party you least agree with. It's just a protest vote. But there's a way we could
Good
make
way to look at it.
more than that. We just need to take a closer look at this.
And I get the whole idea of protest votes. You had that with this current primary here where you saw people vote, you know, like in the Democratic Party, you saw a bunch of in the primaries here, people like not to vote for Biden. You know what I mean? They were voting for others. And people are like, why are you doing that? You're throwing your vote away. But it was supposed to be like a protest of, hey, I'm not going to vote for Biden, or at least not like right now, because whatever platform it is that you feel like the Biden administration has to encompass, right? It's supposed to like directly tell that, hey, there are other people that you need to understand what their political preferences are. So you saw the Republican Party too, or you had like Nikki Haley who's going to get some votes too. But again, it goes down to the fact of whoever comes out of the party, right? Do they really need to encompass the beliefs of those people? Because you got to believe, what are they going to do? Are they going to go, well, I'm going to end up voting for the other one anyway. So if you didn't vote for Biden, but you wanted to vote for Democrat, you'll still vote for Biden or still vote for Trump. You know what I mean? Or is it going to be the other scenario, which means that person's just not going to vote, either not going to vote at all or vote for the other candidate? That's where a lot of things can happen by doing these, you know, not just voting straight party ticket or not voting for the front runner. Anyway, I think I've front loaded too much talking.
New England, the northeastern region of the US. About 15 million people live here. These 6 states send 21 representatives to Congress. And in the 2022 congressional elections, 36% of voters here voted for Republicans. But none of this region's 21 representatives are Republicans.
It means that the perspective of the New England Republicans, who have historically been fiscally conservative and more socially progressive, is not reflected in Congress.
Well, also, you'd have to ask, does that also mean that districts are gerrymandered? 36%. I mean, it's a third of people that have zero representation from their own political party. So is that a gerrymandering issue? If you don't know what gerrymandering is, it's when a district, a voting district is such where it divides up a voting block into other districts and minimizes their percentage. If that makes sense. Hopefully, if you haven't heard that, look up gerrymandering. It's not all that complicated, but a lot of people say it's done intentionally to spread votes out and dilute votes.
This is because of the way we elect representatives to Congress, where every representative comes from a different district. Each district holds its own election, and in each election, the person who gets the most votes wins. These are winner-take-all elections, and they produce this result all over the country. Take the state of Oklahoma. Oklahoma has 5 congressional districts. It votes 1/3 Democratic. It has no Democratic representatives. And before we start blaming gerrymandering...
So with that, okay, he was about to say, I was going to say, I want to, because you brought up gerrymandering, that would be the first thing that I think should be discussed.
No Democratic representatives. And before we start blaming gerrymandering for this, in other words, the shape of these districts, in Massachusetts, which I admit does look kind of gerrymandered, a group of independent mapmakers looked at this situation, and they tried to draw new district maps that would give Republicans some representation here. But they found that though there are more ways of building a districting plan than particles in the galaxy, every single one would produce a 9-0 Democratic delegation.
Okay.
And now imagine if in every single House race, there was also a really popular third party getting 25% of the vote in every district in the country. That party would earn 0.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It wouldn't matter. Like, you got to be at least in the third range to like make any kind of headway.
If you ask yourself, why haven't you voted for a third party? Most of the time is, well, they don't really have a chance. Our system, by its very nature, precludes political competition.
But most...
Do you guys think that needs to change? The whole idea of throwing your vote away. You believe that's a thing? Throwing your vote away, like compromising your own beliefs or whatever, just to the lesser of two evils kind of thing? Or do you think as a country, I don't know what it would take. What would it take for people to start doing that, to actually vote for third party candidates, not go with the status quo? It almost seems like you'd have to somehow convince someone, an individual, that everyone is going to do it, because everyone does the one vote doesn't matter thing, right?
Democracies don't actually work this way. In 2021, a German center-right party called the Free Democratic Party.
By the way, just look real quick. I mean, right away, look how many political parties they have in Germany. I know, like, the purple may seem like not very much, but that's a lot for like a fifth party. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 6 parties. You'd never have that. You'd never have that in the United States. There's not even 5 legitimate parties. Okay, well, I guess you'd have libertarians, constitutionalist party, or the Socialist Party, or something like that. Green Party. None of them would even come close.
In 2021, a German center-right party called the Free Democratic Party won about 90 seats in Germany's parliament. German federal elections have about 300 constituencies that work sort of like America's districts, with each one
Holy Roman Empire map.
representative. And
that's what that looks like.
Out of every one of those races, the Free Democratic Party did not win a single one.
But they have representation.
Germany uses a form of what is called proportional representation.
Proportional representation means that a share of votes gets you a share of seats.
These are 4 common types of proportional representation. And one way
Ask
to
yourself
understand
if you guys like
is,
this.
are you voting for a person or are you voting for a party? So at one end of that spectrum...
What do you think it is in the U.S.? I believe people vote party more than person. They're going to do that. A lot of people in the United States literally do what is called a straight ballot. There's an option on the American voting ballot where you don't have to individually go through every candidate that's running for a position. You can literally just do a one punch that says straight party ticket, all Republican, all Democratic. You don't even have to look at the other ones. And it's really common for people to do that in the U.S. Now, yeah.
In a closed list system, like they use in Spain, for example, you might not even vote for a candidate. You just vote for a party. Each party wins some percentage of the vote, and those percentages each translate into a certain number of seats. The people who fill those seats come off of each party's list. So voters don't get to choose those candidates. That's the closed part. But there are also...
Then that destroys the idea of voting for a person. Do you guys think it's more important to, again, vote for a person? You know, even if you are voting for... You end up voting for some, everybody's on the same political party, right? You still believe it's important to, know the candidates and know what they believe in and stuff like that. Easy thing to do, again, is that straight party vote, because you really don't have to then learn about the people. You're hoping that they just represent the party, and the party has filtered them and done their checks, their due diligence.
Open.
You hope, right?
Which are maybe the most common, used in places like Finland, Belgium, Denmark. A standard version of this is you vote for a person, and your vote counts towards a larger party total, sort of like we saw before, determining how many seats each party gets. But in Open List, you do choose the candidates. The seats go to the people in each party who got the most votes. Germany uses a system called mixed member proportional. Mixed because in their system, you cast 2 votes for a person and for a party. Each district elects 1 person, and those people fill some of the seats in parliament. But the rest of the seats are filled by looking at the party vote and then doling the remaining seats out to the parties until the end product is proportional to the party vote.
Oh, okay.
And the last one we'll look at is the one that Ireland uses to elect its legislature. And this is actually a version of something we're already starting to do in some congressional and local races in the U.S.
Ranked choice.
Ranked choice, very popular.
Voting.
In ranked choice voting,
I saw it. Was it last year? Mr. Beat was really going on a big thing with voting, and he had guests on and was talking about ranked choice voting. And I know that became kind of popular. Then what was the other one that was brought up? Like star choice, something with the star choice. I got to look into that a little bit, because that was another one, and they all kind of seem like pretty good ideas, probably better than what we have, and especially for like presidential voting, because as we know, the Electoral College is seen as very controversial by a lot of people, if it's a system that should be continued or not. But then a lot of people also don't necessarily like popular vote because of what it deludes states potentially. So there's so many different voting formats out there, though.
Instead of just voting for one person, you rank multiple candidates. Yeah. It's a system that encourages you to vote for smaller parties and less established candidates, because if your first choice is unpopular, they use your second choice vote. And that process repeats itself until a certain threshold is reached.
So that gets you the availability where it's like, okay, I will vote for a third party candidate, but it doesn't necessarily mean my vote is going to be just down the toilet. It's like you're going to make your point that, this person should be acknowledged, right? But then also, understanding that, okay, they may not win, so let me give also some support for another candidate. I think a lot of people would say that's better probably than winner take all, right? What do you guys think about that?
On its own, though, ranked choice voting doesn't necessarily make these smaller candidates that much more likely to actually win. They will be at a disadvantage.
But be recognized,
any election
I would think.
That only one person can win. But if you lower the threshold of victory in a ranked choice race, that produces multiple winners, more proportional to the vote.
So help, like, if you want to go 3 parties.
All of these systems have different formulas for turning votes into representation. What they have in common is they all distribute power proportionally, instead of just relying on this.
Winner takes all. That's what we got, right? That's what we got. The only things that aren't like that is, like, in a presidential election, you have Maine, who actually will separate their votes, and it doesn't go all in for them in their electoral college. So, yeah, anyway, let's see.
You'll notice we spent the last few minutes talking about Congress and parliaments, legislatures.
I got some history to add if I can find a good spot for it.
Can definitely be made more fair. That is another video. But they will always, by definition, be single winner elections, most likely to be won by the more established parties.
Now, the other thing I was going to say about it, when you only have 2 parties, is it's going to discourage, I think, discourage compromise. Because when you are, like, let's say you're Germany, you have like 6 parties that all have a decent amount of seats. One party is not going to be able to just pass the legislation that they want. You're going to have legislation that is agreed upon by 3 or 4 parties at least, right? So it's going to encourage more compromise. And in this situation, as long as you won, and since there's only two choices, and if you win, you most likely got majority of the vote, like over 50%, you don't have to compromise, especially with so many legislative requirements just requiring, above 50% vote.
But if Congress is more representative and less polarized, it could change the whole partisan dynamic around the presidency.
Right now, if the president wants to pass a law, he or she, with rare exceptions, needs both Democrats and Republican Party support. But if there were 3 or 4 or 5 parties,
that's often not the case, though.
That would open up
that's often
far
not the
more
case,
coalitional possibilities and combinations to pass laws.
The key to making this happen will be taking these
only some things require
single-winner
2/3 vote
elections that we use to elect Congress and replacing them with multi-winner elections that pick, say, 3 to 5 people to represent a district. For example, Oklahoma, now 5 congressional districts, could act as a single district, holding an election that 5 people can win. It would still mostly be represented by Republicans, just not exclusively. Another option is that we could keep many of our current districts and just make Congress bigger, so use each district to elect more representatives. But okay, how do we
Congress is huge already.
Do any of this?
Does Congress really need to be bigger? You know what I mean? If population grows, but bigger just to make it bigger? I don't know. I don't know if that's if that really answers it, right? Like answers the question.
Federal law currently says that no congressional district can elect more than one representative. So to make Congress more representative, that is what we'll need to change. But
no.
That change.
No. Well, if you want to I mean, there's so many other options. It doesn't have to just be that.
It's to be made by Congress.
When the country is struggling to even agree on small things, it can feel really unthinkable. But then there are plenty of indicators that being a member of Congress is pretty miserable these days. Changing the system would let members focus on the reasons they ran for Congress in the first place, serving their community, making sure they get things done.
But there are other ways to...
It does seem like, don't you think a lot of politicians get disillusioned when, they run, they have their platform, they get their support, but then they go into Congress and feel just powerless. And you find out all the other politics that goes on and how there's seniority, right? And if you're the new kid, nobody cares about you unless you're loud and annoying, or you know what I mean? Like you have to play by all the rules. And I think that happens for a lot of politicians, and maybe they lose a little bit of their spirit that got them into the first place. And then basically you have to change your whole strategy to be able to stay in Congress by playing nice with the rest of the party and stuff like that, not challenging your party, because you can get ousted very easily.
Change things too. The states each choose how their own state legislatures get elected. Cities choose how their city councils get elected. And the hurdles to changing those are much, much lower.
The more experiments we can try, the more different forms of proportional representation we can implement in the United States, I think the better ultimately our democracy will be.
This rule feels really simple, but that simplicity, it hides a lot of problems.
We're one of the oldest, if not the oldest democracy in the world, right?
Isn't that amazing to think about? When you think about it, because again, U.S. became a republic in an era where monarchy was still key. In a lot of cases, absolute monarchy was still key. So it's an old system. Is it outdated? Even though it may feel new, it's also outdated and old, I should say. Not necessarily outdated. You have to decide if it's outdated, but a lot older than, even though you have all these other countries that are much older than the United States, their governments are very new, because so many of them were formed since the creation of the United States, and a lot of them even with the 20th century, with world wars changing government structures.
Other democracies, most of the world's democracies, are using a system that's better. We just need to update our system.
Thanks for watching. One really important way that we're able to continue making videos is viewer contributions, support from people who like what we do and want to help us keep doing it.
He's right. There's a big YouTube creators are having a real problem right now. People that cover politics and history, like, someone like myself does. A lot of stuff is getting being deemed, you know, not suitable for advertisers. Anything mildly controversial and is there's kind of an issue with that. So support all your favorite content creators that are out there. Everybody that I cover. Thanks to all those who've been supporting me with the channel memberships and all that stuff and Patreon. But yeah, it's an issue right now. All right, my final thoughts. The historical context I wanted to add didn't really have a great opportunity within the video, but there's a couple things I wanted to mention, and the two coming off the top of my mind actually have to do with George Washington. And when you look at that guy as you know, the first president of the United States, he seemed to have been pretty good at foresight of what American politics was going to be as he was leaving office. Now, first off, one of the big things that people really applaud him for was leaving voluntarily. There wasn't term limits then, but stepped away and set a standard that presidents aren't just going to be people that should or are going to just try to be in for life, right? But keep the cycle moving. But on his way out, he warned against basically American parties, political parties. He actually was kind of advising against political parties because he said what it really just does is becomes this thing where you punish, you create enemies, right? You get your party, and that by you know, almost by definition is going to make you outside of another party, and you're going to be enemies, and you're going to spend your political life trying to like punish the enemy rather than like do your job. Now, it's probably impossible to think of a country without political parties because people naturally are going to organize. They want to work together, right? And that based off of similar political ideas. So it's almost impossible to not have it. But you know, even in the early democracy, you could see what the problems were going to be. Washington saw it because we see it today, right? People get into politics simply because they want to defeat the other, right? And will spend their time actively trying to just, you know, block another party from being able to do stuff, right? Getting in the way, filibustering, all of those sorts of things that puts a big stall into our democratic process. So I think we should definitely be considering other ideas. It does seem now that there's a pretty good sample size of what other democratic nations are doing. You saw like what Germany was doing, and in the Scandinavian countries, how you actually have more representation from smaller parties, but they're not overrepresented, right? So what do you guys think? What do you think about things, again, like ranked voting or any other type of other voting method than what we have now, which is for the president electoral college, and then for other elections, basically winner take all? What do you think are the best options out there? And do you think it's time for a change? Let me know down below. We'll see y'all next time.